Welcome students. In our last class, we discussed about plant-water relations like diffusion, facilitated diffusion, osmosis, osmotic pressure, osmotic potential, turgor pressure, wall pressure, etc. So, today we are moving to the next portion, absorption of water. Absorption of water from soil takes place in two steps, that is from soil to root hairs and root hairs to xylem. So absorption of water takes place in two steps, from soil to root hairs, then from root hairs to xylem, from xylem to different parts. So, absorption of water from soil takes place in two steps, that is from soil to root hairs and root hairs to xylem, then from xylem to different parts of the plant body. So, what is the water absorbing organ in plant? We know the water absorbing organ in plant is root. Okay, so root absorb water from the soil. Mainly, if we are specifically saying root hairs. So, root hairs absorb the dissolved minerals containing water from the soil. So, root hairs are unicellular extension of epidermal cells without cuticle. So, they are the extension of epidermal cells. Extension of epidermal cell. Okay, so root hairs are unicellular, that is a single cell, and it is the extension of epidermal cell and which lack cuticle. So, absorption of water takes place in two steps. From soil, root hair absorb the water and it passes through the xylem vessels, and from xylem to the different parts of the plant body. The water absorbing organ of plant is root. Specifically, root hairs. Root hairs are unicellular extension of epidermal cells and which lack cuticle. Then, numerous thin root hairs provide large surface area for absorption. So, presence of numerous root hairs will increase the surface area for absorption. Okay. So, root are the water absorbing organs. Now, the path of water across root cell. The path of water across root cell. So, mainly three paths, that is apoplastic pathway, symplastic pathway and transmembrane pathway. Okay. So, the movement of water through cell in three pathways, that is first one apoplastic pathway, symplastic pathway, third one transmembrane pathway. In apoplastic pathway, the water moves through the intercellular spaces. Intercellular spaces between the adjacent cells. So, water moves through the intercellular space. Whereas in symplastic, it moves through the cytoplasm, or it crosses the cell membrane, or through the plasmodesmata. Plasmodesmata are structures which is found on the plasma membrane of every cell. They act as a door. They act as a door to the cell. So, water can enter into the cell and water can move out of the cell. Then, transmembrane route. Transmembrane route means water flows through the plasma membrane. So, water flows through the plasma membrane. Water goes through the plasma membrane. So, water can enter into the cell and exit from the cell. So, there is three pathways: apoplastic pathway, symplastic pathway and transmembrane pathway. Apoplastic of pathway is mainly the movement of water through the extracellular spaces, cell walls and interior of dead walls. Extracellular spaces. Extracellular spaces, interior of the cells or through the dead cells. Okay. So also through the dead cells. Xylem vessels are dead cell. Why? Because they lack living cells. They lack cytoplasm or nuclei. Then symplastic pathway means movement of water molecules through plasmodesmata. Then transmembrane means water air crosses through plasma membrane. And water enters a cell on one side and exits from the cell through the other side. Now, the mechanism of water absorption. The mechanism of water absorption. Mechanism of water absorption. Okay. Mechanism. There is two mechanisms. First one, active transport. Second one, passive transport. Active transport means with the expenditure of ATP, whereas passive means without utilizing any energy. So, active are of two types, osmotic absorption, non-osmotic absorption. Osmotic as well as non-osmotic. Osmotic as well as non-osmotic. Okay, so active means mechanism is due to the forces generated in the root itself. Active absorption means mechanism is due to force generated in the root itself, whereas passive means it is regulated by the process transpiration. So first we can discuss what is active water absorption. Active water absorption. Okay, active means the forces generated by the root itself. It's are of two types, osmotic and non-osmotic. First one, osmotic. First one, osmotic. Osmotic means soil water which is imbibed by the cell wall of the root hair by osmosis. So, soil water is imbibed, that is the process imbibition by the cell wall of the root hair by osmosis. Then, the soil water is hypotonic compared to the cell sap. Okay. Soil water is hypotonic, that is the solvent concentration is high, whereas the cell sap is hypertonic, that is the solvent concentration is low. So endosmosis takes place. Endosmosis takes place, that is water from the soil move into the cell sap. Water from the soil which is moved into the cell sap. Now the cell sap is hypotonic in nature. So from the cell sap it moves to the outer cortex. From outer cortex it moves to the inner cortex, then to the endodermis, and finally it reaches the xylem vessels. Okay. So finally it reaches the protoxylem. We know xylem are of two types, protoxylem and metaxylem. Protoxylem are small in size, whereas metaxylem is big in size. So as the sap reaches protoxylem, there a pressure develops. So when sap reaches protoxylem, there exert a pressure. Okay, due to the presence of water, there exert a pressure. That pressure is called root pressure. That pressure is called root pressure. So when the sap reaches the protoxylem, there exert a pressure. That pressure is called root pressure. Okay, so these are the osmotic theory. What osmotic theory says? Osmotic theory says that the cell wall that imbibe the water from the soil through the process osmosis. We know what is osmosis. So then the soil water is hypotonic in nature, whereas cell sap is hypertonic in nature. So usually endosmosis takes place. As a result of endosmosis, water enters from the soil to the cell sap. Now the cell sap is hypotonic in nature. So from the cell sap it moves to the neighboring cells, that is inner cortex, outer cortex. From outer cortex it moves to the inner cortex. From inner cortex it reaches the endodermis, then pericycle. Finally it reaches the protoxylem. So when the cell sap reaches the protoxylem, they exert a pressure. That pressure leads to the formation of root pressure, which helps in the transfer of water. Okay, this is osmotic water absorption. There is certain objections that against this osmotic mechanism of water absorption. First one, the cell sap concentration in xylem is not always high. That is, the cell sap concentration, that is always the cell sap never be hypertonic. Okay, so always the cell sap never be hypertonic. Then the next objection is root pressure not universal in all plants, especially trees. That is, root pressure is not always that is not universal. All plants doesn't have this root pressure. Now non-osmotic absorption. Okay, so this is about osmotic. Now non-osmotic. Non-osmotic means there is no process of osmosis. The absorption of water takes place even if the concentration of cell sap of root is low compared to soil water. That is, even if the cell sap is hypotonic, the water may move into the cell. This movement requires energy. Okay, so this movement requires energy. The energy is obtained from the requires energy. So this energy is obtained from as a result of respiration. So absorption of water is correlated with respiration. Okay, so non-osmotic absorption of water requires energy. The energy is obtained as a result of respiration. So there is a link between the water absorption and respiration. The respiratory inhibitors like KCN, that is potassium cyanide, chloroform are applied, which leads to decrease in the rate of respiration as well as absorption of water. So if we apply the potassium cyanide, chloroform, so those are respiratory inhibitors. Respiratory inhibitors. Okay. So, potassium cyanide, chloroform are respiratory inhibitors. When we apply these respiratory inhibitors, the rate of respiration decreases along with the water absorption. So, water absorption also decreases. Why? Because for non-osmotic mechanism of water absorption, energy is required. So, this energy is provided by the process respiration. So when we add the KCN chloroform, those are respiratory inhibitors which leads to the decrease in the rate of respiration. Okay, so along with the decrease in respiration, the absorption of water also affected. So these are about active mechanism of absorption. So the osmotic as well as non-osmotic. Active absorption means the forces which is generated in the roots. Now two types, osmotic as well as non-osmotic mechanism. Osmotic means the from the soil water, the cell wall may imbibe water by the process osmosis. So the soil water is always hypotonic in nature. That is, the solvent concentration is high, whereas cell sap is hypertonic in nature. That is, the concentration of solvent is less, whereas the concentration of solute is high. So endosmosis takes place. Endosmosis means the transfer or movement of water molecules from the hypotonic to the hypertonic solution. So cell sap containing water now. So now the cell sap is converted to hypotonic from hypertonic. Then the cell sap may, from the cell sap the water may passes to the outer cortex. From outer cortex it moves to the inner cortex. From inner cortex it moves to the endodermis. From endodermis it moves to the pericycle. Finally it reaches the protoxylem. From the protoxylem, actually when the sap reaches the protoxylem, there exerts a pressure. Those pressure are called as root pressure. Okay, so when the sap reaches the protoxylem, there exerts a pressure. That pressure is called root pressure. Okay, so such root pressure is responsible for the transport of water. Then non-osmotic water absorption. Non-osmotic water absorption. Okay, before that there is two objections regarding osmotic water absorption. First one, cell sap concentration in xylem is not always high, whereas not always high. Then the second one is root pressure is not universal in all plants, especially in trees the root pressure cannot be found. Okay, then second type is non-osmotic mechanism of water absorption. So non-osmotic means even if the cell sap concentration is low, that is even if the cell sap is hypotonic, the water may move from the soil to the cell sap. Okay, so it requires energy for this movement, that is against the concentration gradient. For this movement energy is required. Those energy is provided by or provided as a result of respiration. Then the potassium cyanide, chloroform, etc. are the respiratory inhibitors. When we apply these respiratory inhibitors, the rate of respiration is decreased. Along with the rate of respiration, water absorption rate also decreases. So there is a link between the respiration as well as water absorption. Now, what is passive absorption of water? So first we discuss about active. Now, passive. Now, passive mechanism of water absorption. So, it is regulated by the process called transpiration. So, passive mechanism is regulated by the process transpiration. So, there is no role for roots in this mechanism of water absorption. So, we know what is transpiration. Transpiration is loss of water in the form of water vapor from the aerial parts of the plant. Okay, so due to transpiration, water loss from the leaf causes a decrease in turgor pressure. So due to respiration, a decrease in turgor pressure may happens in the leaf. Decrease in turgor pressure occurs in the leaf. So as a result of this decrease in turgor pressure, it leads to increase in diffusion. As a result of this decrease in turgor pressure, it may lead to increase in diffusion pressure defect. So this may lead to increase in diffusion pressure defect. Okay, so as a transpiration occurs in the leaves, which leads to the decrease in turgor pressure, it may increase the diffusion pressure defect in leaf. So it leads to withdrawal of water from the adjacent cells. Okay, so when a cell containing low turgor pressure, which may increase the diffusion pressure defect. So it may lead to the withdrawal of water from the neighboring cells. So withdrawal of water from neighboring cells. In xylem, a tension develops and it transmitted downwards up to root, results in absorption of water from soil. So this results a tension which develops in xylem from xylem up to roots. Okay, so this tension in xylem may goes up to roots. As a result, absorption of water takes place. So, as a result, water absorption occurs. As a result, water absorption may take place. So, what is passive? Passive is it is based on the process called transpiration. We know what is transpiration. Transpiration means the loss of water molecules or water vapor from the leaves. As a result, there occurs a decrease in turgor pressure. This decrease in turgor pressure of the leaf cell leads to increase in the diffusion pressure defect. As a result, the water withdrawal happened from the neighboring cells of the leaf cell. So, there occurs a tension in the xylem vessels. These tensions may move from the top to up to the roots. So, this tension may result the absorption of water from the soil by the roots. So, here transpiration is the main role which helps for the water absorption. So, the pathway may be both symplastic or apoplastic. So, the pathway of water movement is the pathway can be either symplastic or apoplastic. Okay, these are about passive mode of water absorption. Now we can differentiate the active and passive water absorption. We can differentiate active and passive water absorption. Active and passive. Okay, first one active. Active absorption takes place the activity of root and root hairs. So, active absorption is based on the activity of root and root hairs, whereas the passive absorption is not developed in roots. So, root has no role. Here, root and root hairs absorbs the water from the soil, but whereas in passive, no role of root or root hairs. Why? Because here it is based on process transpiration. Then the second difference is transpiration has no role in active absorption, whereas here passive the absorption is regulated by the process transpiration. So here no role for transpiration. No role for transpiration, whereas in passive it is regulated by transpiration. So passive mode of water absorption is regulated by the process transpiration. Okay. Then in active transport, the root hairs have high diffusion pressure defect as compared to the soil solution, and therefore water is taken by tension. Okay, whereas in passive, the absorption occurs due to the tension created in the xylem sap by transpiration pull. Thus, the water is sucked in by this tension. So, in active, the tension is created by the high dPd in root hairs. So, tension generated on xylem due to high dPd. Okay, so the tension generated on xylem due to tension generated on cell sap due to high dPd, whereas here tension is generated on the xylem. As a result, the water absorption takes place. Okay, then here in active absorption, the respiratory energy needed, whereas in passive, there is no need of respiratory energy. So, energy required for active absorption, whereas here no need of energy. No need of energy. Okay. Then it involves symplastic movement of water in active absorption, whereas passive both symplastic and apoplastic may occur. In active only symplastic, whereas in passive both symplastic as well as apoplastic pathway. So these are the difference between the symplastic as well as apoplastic pathway. Difference between active and passive absorption of water. So in active, root and root hairs are involved in the absorption of water, whereas in passive there is no role for root or root hairs for the absorption of water. And in active there is no role for transpiration, whereas in passive the absorption of water is regulated by the process transpiration. Then the tension which is generated on the cell sap due to the high diffusion pressure defect in cell sap, which helps in the absorption of water, whereas in passive the xylem containing the high diffusion pressure defect, so a tension may produce. This tension helps in the absorption of water. In active absorption of water, energy is required. The energy is provided by the respiration, whereas in passive there is no need of energy for the absorption of water. And in active the water pathway is symplastic only, whereas in passive both symplastic as well as apoplastic pathway of water movement takes place. Okay, so these are about the absorption of water. So water is absorbed from the soil and water is absorbed by the organ called roots, and from roots and water can be transported by three pathways, that is apoplastic, symplastic and transmembrane pathway. Apoplastic pathway means by includes crossing cell walls, extracellular spaces and interior of some dead cells, whereas in symplastic it is through the plasmodesmata. Then transmembrane route. Transmembrane means it may cross the plasma membrane of every cell. So water can enter from one side of the cell and it can go out or exit through other side of the cell. Then water absorption or mechanism of water absorption are of two types: active absorption and passive absorption. In active absorption, osmotic as well as non-osmotic absorption are there, whereas in passive there is only one type without the need of energy, whereas active with the help of energy. So these are about absorption of water. Okay. So now we want to discuss about the ascent of sap. Ascent of sap. So we can discuss ascent of sap in our next class. So these are about today. So if you have any doubt, ask me.